Okay, we'll go on to number 7. Is Angie here? Angie walk away? Requests for statutory changes? That's a mad dash. Jeff, do you want to come up as well? Thank you.
All right. Do you want to log in? Do you have the?
Go ahead, Angie.
Thank you. We
And
just
Jeff.
have, or maybe Kelsey, if you could log in and show the two. We have 2 requests this month for policy requests that we'd like to review with you. The first one is a repeal of the interventions for reading difficulties grant program. It's a pilot program that is set to sunset on July 1, 2024. But what we're requesting is that we seek legislation to have it sunset July 1, 2023, so a year early. And this is based on the fact that we're finding that it's not being used as much and it's not resulting in the results that were anticipated. So it would be essentially sunsetting or repealing the program 1 year earlier. That's the first one. Would you like me to move forward with the second one?
Go ahead.
The second one is we have a Carson Smith Scholarship Program. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but it provides funding to students who have disabilities to be able to attend a private school. We've had it come to our attention that there has been at least one incident where a school increased the tuition amount for a Carson Smith Scholarship student above that they charged for other students. And in order to just avoid this from happening in the future, staff are recommending that the legislature codify a prohibition on allowing private schools to increase the tuition for those who are receiving state funds, like through this Carson Smith Scholarship. Those are the 2 policy requests.
We're all. Board Member Cannon?
Just a quick question on the reading difficulties grant. So that sounds like something that had money attached to it. What is the amount of money and where will that money be diverted with the repeal of this particular law statute?
Could you recognize Sarah Woodkey, Chair?
Yep. Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, there we go.
Hi, Sarah Wibke, Pre-K through 12 Literacy and Library Media Coordinator. Thank you for having me. The amount of money is $350,000 per year, so it's not a ton of money. And with that money, LEAs can receive about $30,000 per school. So it's not a ton of money going to it. And with that, currently a lot of LEAs aren't participating or choosing not to participate because with the ESSER funds and SB 127 and all these other funding sources, they're finding other ways to provide the supports that they need for intervention.
Go ahead. Turn your light back on, Janet. Oh, wait a minute. Try again.
Flashing.
Jim, will you turn yours off?
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, has all of the work around letters sort of taken over what the idea of this grant was made to address?
May I respond?
Go ahead.
In thinking about the way those two coincide, Letters is really providing educators with the knowledge of what to do when students are struggling, or even students who are gifted. It's where is the student at, meeting them where they're at, and then providing them what they need. And so teachers are learning sort of that whole spectrum of what to do based on where the student is. And so certainly that would help within core instruction and intervention, absolutely. It's not necessarily the same as an actual program, which is what this grant was more around purchasing programs for intervention. And so it's slightly different, but Letters is providing them with knowledge that would help within the specific space.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Board Member Moss, were you in queue somewhere?
I was, but I had the same question.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Board Member Lear?
Thank you. I had a question about this Carson Smith issue, the voucher issue on Carson Smith. I'm wondering if that language that you're proposing, I don't know if that's just an example but I think it maybe needs to be narrower. Who would have thunk that this would be taken advantage of this way? Unfortunately, it is. So I think when if you find a sponsor, when you propose this change, I'm thinking you need to be even more careful in defining more, so that there isn't additional charges for enrollment or additional fee charges or things like that, so that, again, if it's being taken advantage of like this, then I think you have to be equally strategic.
Are you good with that,
Good
Angie?
feedback,
I
yeah.
think that's also for the other scholarship. You're not stating Carson Smith, you're saying any grant program, right?
Well, may I respond?
Yeah.
The request is specific to Carson Smith, but we could, if the board would like, we do have the special needs
Yep.
opportunity scholarship. I apologize if I'm getting the name wrong. And if there are any other scholarship programs, it sounds like the board is recommending that we make that broader, and I think we'd be happy to work on that. Or incorporate that.
Thank you. Carol, did that?
I just want to be really sure that we are, if we see this problem now, we
Could see it.
make it very carefully narrow to serve the students it was designed to serve.
Right. Okay.
In the way
thank
it was designed to serve them with public money.
you. Yep. Thank you, Carol. Board Member Earl?
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions. So let me understand, is that okay if I
Yes.
ask it? We had a school do it with one student, or every student that was using the Carson Smith money at that school was being charged more?
Do you know the answer to that? Or do you want me to? Okay, may I answer? Yes. So we just had one parent who complained and provided evidence that it happened to that one parent. Our staff have not done an investigation of the school to see if it happened to other parents. So it's based on a single parent bringing it to the board's attention.
Okay,
or
and then
USB's attention.
Okay, and then my other question around this is, was it related to the fact the child was a Carson Smith recipient, or they had additional services that were needed?
She answered.
Yeah.
Tammy here.
Introduce yourself, please.
Tammy Gear, Fiscal Data and Access Coordinator in Student Support. They indicated that it was charged for additional administrative fees for administering the Carson Smith Scholarship is what that incident was.
Okay, okay.
It wasn't for additional services. It
So,
was
okay, that's
just
what I was-
specifically for,
That's what I was trying to clarify, because I was
Yeah.
wondering, because we get additional monies in regular school for additional services. I was just trying to balance that out and understand the parameters with that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So, okay. So this is based on one complaint, but we don't know if it's a systemic problem. So, okay.
Thank you. Board Member Hart?
I hate that we have to make a rule for things like this where it seems to be just not thoughtful. But my question is, and I don't know if anyone can answer this, do private schools have graduated costs like that? Is that a standard practice? Do we know? I don't know. Do we know anything about, okay. And do we, okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Hart. Vice Chair Davis?
I move that the board direct staff to work with legislators on potential amendments to Utah Code as proposed.
Second, Board Member Lear? Any more discussion to this motion? Board Member Hart, your light's still on. Board Member Moss?
Just a question. I'm trying to find the language. I think the language was that they cannot charge more solely because the individual is a recipient of the scholarship, right? And so that if they were able to demonstrate that there is an additional cost associated with this student, they could do that. it would simply be, you can't just set up an artificial sort of second tier charging for, well, that's Carson Smith, therefore, but if there's no legitimate reason for it, they could do that, correct?
Do you want to answer or you want me to?
Can I answer?
Go ahead, Tammy.
So the Carson Smith Scholarship only covers tuition. And so if they have other things like books or other fees, then that scholarship cannot cover those. It only covers tuition. So adding on other fees like, books or whatever doesn't work for Carson Smith. The other scholarship program does allow for books and things like that, but it's totally separate, and this is just Carson Smith. So, yeah, this scholarship is only supposed to cover just the tuition.
Go ahead,
May I
Angie.
add? Thank you. I would just add, it sounds like the fee in question was actually a fee where they said, we're charging you this fee because you're a Carson Smith scholarship recipient to administer or to handle the fact that you are a Carson Smith scholarship student. So that is I think to answer your question, the idea is to make it so that there's not a specific fee or an additional fee or cost because the student is receiving Carson Smith scholarship funds. So I based on this feedback, I'm guessing that private schools, when they review this potential legislation, will raise a lot of these issues as well, and there will be an interest in making the language, fairly tight, because if there are other things like books or other fees that are normally charged for additional services, for example, what I'm hearing from you is there's many who do not want to make sure that it doesn't then prohibit a private school or a student from receiving additional services or participating in, additional programs, side programs, for example, an activity or whatever, because they are participating in Carson Smith. So we do need to do a little bit more research about how this might apply to programs other than Carson Smith. At this time, staff only were looking at this as far as how it applies to Carson Smith, especially because, as Tammy mentioned, the special needs opportunity scholarship and a student opportunity scholarship program, and I apologize if I'm not saying the name right, but that program there's a lot more uses for those funds, and it's also managed or brokered in some ways by a scholarship granting organization, and we don't have the same. We do have oversight and some administrative oversight over that program, but it's not the same as our oversight and responsibilities related to Carson Smith. So I just wanted to give that clarification that we'll want to do some more research, but we'll definitely raise it to the potential legislative sponsor that this conversation started out with this Carson Smith scholarship and this specific incident, but that the sponsor may want to consider how this same protection for those students might apply to the Student Opportunity Scholarship Program or any other future scholarship programs that might be coming.
Quick follow?
Yeah, just remember, we have a motion on the table.
Yeah, I'm speaking to the motion. I mean, I support the motion if the idea is to make sure they're not artificially charging just by virtue of, well, you're in this bucket, as opposed to being able to, especially if this expands beyond Carson Smith, if there's a legitimate cost associated with serving that student, then I would assume they'd be able to still charge that. We're trying to make sure that it's like to like, right? All students are treated similarly and addressed with the cost of serving them as opposed to the label or where they came from, correct? So I'm in support of that.
Can I
Go
make
ahead.
one more clarification?
Go ahead.
The Carson Smith Scholarship, I should have stated this, is the amount that is given is based on the number of special education minutes that a student needs. So if they need 180 minutes or more of special education service, they get a higher scholarship amount already. And then they get a lower amount if it's 179
Yep,
or
that's
less.
helpful.
Sorry, I should have said that before.
So they already get more. Okay. Board Member Lear?
I would like to see the language eventually for this that's proposed to a legislator, not to micromanage you folks, but just to sort of be able to understand what we're proposing as a board, if that's the will of the board. And the second point I wanted to make is a question, actually. I can't remember now, there are so many, getting to be so many of these voucher scholarships, that, is this one doesn't allow discrimination? Is this one that doesn't allow the schools to accept this, do they have to abide by this discrimination, the federal discrimination regulations? Do you remember? And I don't even need to probe into this deeply now. I'm just saying, if that is one requirement for the schools that receive these scholarships, it might be worth exploring if this is a form of discrimination, if students who are with certain kinds of disabilities are being charged more than other students with disabilities. That's a form, in my mind, of a disability discrimination. So if that provision is in there, then that needs to be called to the attention of whoever sponsors this, as well as some language that would maybe more clearly define what discrimination means.
Okay, so if you can just add that to your repertoire.
Right.
But Board Member Lear, I think that maybe in reverse of what you're asking, they don't go to the legislator and say, write this is what the board wants, and they write it, then they bring it back to us again. Okay.
Whatever the process is, I'm fine
I
with
just
that.
didn't want to make the process that we have to write
No,
it. and
I
send it
just
to them.
want to make sure that it accomplishes, if we
What you
go
need.
to bat for this, we want it to accomplish our
Yes.
goal.
Okay, thank you so much. Board Member Hart?
I'm wondering, what is the administrative burden for Carson Smith? What are the activities that are above and beyond the normal enrollment procedures?
Can I answer?
Go ahead.
They have to the parents fill out an application, and then the private school has to take part in an assessment team meeting to determine that the child is eligible under special education rules, so that's one extra meeting. Our LEAs under Child Fund, Special Education Child Fund, are the ones that are doing the assessment to make sure they're eligible, so there's that, and then they all get together. So there is that extra meeting that they have to have.
And that's outside of a regular IEP meeting that's required?
So when they take this Carson Smith scholarship, they do not have IEP meetings anymore. They are not guaranteed under the IEP anymore. They have to be eligible for special education, but they waive their rights to an IEP, and the private school serves them how they feel best.
One follow-up question.
Go ahead.
Are there provisions for those, how are those people that are in those meetings paid?
So it would be just part of their regular duties, just like
So it would be
people coming to
employees of the private school?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Board Member Earl?
Yeah, so there's two different, if I'm understanding, there is already a different tuition reimbursement for the private because of as an additional need there. Is that what I heard that? I'm making sure I understand that.
Can I respond?
Is that accurate?
That is accurate. There's different tuitions based on how many IEP minutes they would get if they were in a public school. There's also a different tuition amount for
Okay, so
whether
it's
they're half day or
weighted-
full day.
It's weighted for those.
Yeah, so
things
there's,
accommodated.
it's like
Okay.
less than 179, more than 180 are two different things, and then half day
Okay.
and full day.
Okay, thank you, that clarified.
Thank you. All right, seeing no more lights, the motion before the board is that the board directs staff to work with legislators on potential amendments to Utah Code as proposed. All in favor? Those opposed? It's unanimous. Okay, and we are on number 8. It is lunchtime. We will be back here at 10 minutes to 1 for after lunch. Okay, thank you.